Believed. That was a sincere moment.
We were just playing a cruel game of pretend. My girlfriend actually burst into laughter when I knelt down to propose on that rooftop terrace during her birthday celebration.
Joking.
Her inner circle made sure to capture every second of my humiliation for their TikTok feed. I didn't fight back, and I didn't raise my voice. Weeks later, the unedited footage hit the web, and the internet dismantled her curated persona in a single night. Hey Reddit, I've been a ghost in these forums for years, but tonight the silence in my head has become too loud to ignore. My name is Nate,
Finged.
and I'm 29 now. What I'm about to share goes back 3 years to a hotel rooftop after party for a colleague's wedding in July 2022. I didn't even want to be there that night.
Friend Kyle practically dragged me along because he was terrified of showing up solo.
I was tucked away near the bar, half focused on my phone, when she walked into the room. Lena. She wasn't loud,
First,
but she had this gravity that pulled everyone's gaze toward her. She was the rare kind of person who could own an entire space without even trying. She traded jabs with strangers, owned the dance floor,
vent.
and somehow ended up sliding into the chair next to mine after bumping into me by mistake. We started talking about the most trivial things imaginable. How wretched the wedding playlist was, her bizarre,
Filled.
irrational fear of pigeons, the debate over whether fries belonged in a milkshake. She told me that was disgusting, and I told her she was clearly missing out on life.
Fun.
She laughed with such genuine abandon that I remember thinking, I could listen to that sound for the rest of my days. Later that night, we left together, hunted down a food truck,
Feel.
and shared those fries while sitting on the hood of her friend's car. Everything felt effortless, as if we'd known each other for lifetimes. Exactly 1 week later, we were officially dating. The first year was a smooth,
Steady climb.
we took spontaneous trips, spent that stretched until the sunrise, and wove ourselves into each other's social circles. She brought a vibrant, chaotic energy to everything she touched.
Vict.
I was perfectly content being the calm anchor to her storm. Everyone fell in love with her, my parents, my friends, my coworkers. I genuinely believed she was the one. She used to whisper that she adored how steady and grounded I was. I loved how she could turn the most mundane Tuesday into an adventure. Back then, she was grinding away in a mid-level marketing role. Nothing overly prestigious, but she had a hunger for more. When she finally transitioned into PR, that was the moment the climate started to shift. Suddenly, her vocabulary changed to accommodate brand strategists, influencers, and event planners people whose lives were lived entirely through a camera lens. At first, I told myself it was just the nature of her climb. Then came the phrases that stung. You have to understand. Nate,
This is my world now.
I never started an argument over it. I've always been a firm believer that people should be allowed to evolve. But piece by piece,
Feeds.
I began to watching her drift into a version of herself that didn't have a seat for me. Her phone became an impenetrable fortress. It was always face down on the table, tucked within her reach at all times.
You'd catch a glimpse of a notification.
Offer a secret smile and lock the screen with a flick of her thumb. Once or twice, I worked up the courage to ask who she was talking to. She'd just dismiss me. It's just work, Nate.
You stop being so paranoid.
So I'd stop, but I never stopped noticing. Everyone notices when they're being erased, even when they act like they don't. Around that same time, she started labeling me as too serious.
Finga.
During arguments, it was just a casual biting remark. She'd toss out. If I dared to bring up the idea of apartment hunting or mapping out a summer vacation months in advance, she'd shut it down. You think too far ahead.
Nate, let's just focus on having fun right now.
I didn't think asking for a future meant I was rushing the clock, but to her, it was a heavy burden. Then came the small, jagged lies not big enough to demand a confrontation.
Few but too frequent to ignore.
She'd tell me she was dining by the harbor, but the backdrop of her social media post was clearly downtown. I questioned her once and she just shrugged it off. Plans changed. No apology, no nervous tremor in her voice, just total apathy. I let it slide, like I did with everything else. Other things started piling up too, like the way she stopped calling me her boyfriend in public.
Thing for my guy instead. Dot.
The first time, I laughed it off as a joke. By the third time, the gravity of it hit me. She also started scrolling through her feed while I was pouring my heart out,
Thing.
laughing at her screen in the middle of a sentence. I would just stop talking and wait. Shed. Look up! Feigning confusion. Sorry, what were you saying? Eventually, I just stopped repeating myself.
Phew.
But she still had those moments, those sweet, flickering glimpses of the woman I fell for. A random text, a small gift, the I miss you messages that made you forget the coldness of the previous week.
Bring think of
Those crumbs of affection were what kept me chained there much longer than I should have stayed. When she was good, she was incredible. But when she pulled away,
he made me feel like I was a villain for simply desiring honesty.
one evening we were curled up at her place when her phone illuminated the dark room. She chuckled, fired off a quick text, and flipped it back over.
Easy.
I didn't utter a word, but she caught the flicker of pain in my eyes. You aren't about to get all jealous, right? She asked with a smirk.
I whispered.
Not really. She leaned in, kissed my cheek, and whispered back. Good.
That about you.
It felt like a laboratory experiment. He was testing exactly how much pressure she could apply before I snapped. Eventually, I started keeping a digital log on my phone. I wrote down the dates,
Fashion.
the locations, and the inconsistencies in her stories, not to trap her, but to keep myself from believing I was losing my mind. She was already halfway out the door,
You.
and I hadn't realized that while I was busy planning her perfect birthday, she was busy drafting her exit strategy. Lena's 26th birthday was on the horizon, and she had been obsessing over it for weeks.
He wanted
Something elevated, that was her word, not mine. A rooftop dinner surrounded by her friends, her family, and her growing PR circle. She had been trading mood boards with her friend Maya,
femme.
mapping out every aesthetic detail. I mirrored her vision perfectly so that the night would remain hers. She called them her content circle. I barely knew these people,
Thing.
but I understood the kind of people who treat life as a background for their cameras. When she mentioned the rooftop, I already knew exactly which venue she was dreaming of.
Fame hotel
Where our paths crossed 3 years ago. She still referred to it as her lucky spot.
bought.
So, without a single word to her, I booked it.
You.
I coordinated with Maya to handle the guest list and the logistics so that Lena wouldn't trace the preparation back to me. I figured if she wanted a flawless night, I was going to be the one to give it to her.
That was the night I resolved to propose.
I'd been grappling with the idea for months, but the fear of rejection kept me quiet. Lately, everything felt off, but I pushed that instinct into a dark corner. Been convinced myself that proposing on her birthday would be the ultimate reset.
Tot.
The foundation diesel we built before the world and the brand got in the way. Every important person in her life would be there.
It would be raw, natural, and beautiful.
I handled everything personally. I secured the private rooftop area, hired an acoustic guitarist,
Thing.
and instructed the hotel staff to drape the space in warm string lights and gold accents to match her theme. The hotel manager remarked that it was a popular spot for proposals. I took that as a sign from the universe,
The evening was perfect.
or so it seemed on the surface. Lena walked onto that roof, and for a split second, I saw the woman I fell in love with in 2022. The music was soft. The city lights were dancing in the background.
Thing. And everyone was gathered around the center table.
I stood up, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I walked toward her, pulled the ring from my pocket, and dropped to one knee.
If I had a speech.
Reedy something about growth and where we started. But as I looked up, she didn't have tears in her eyes. She had a phone. Oh my God, are you actually doing this right now? She laughed.
Fusky.
And it wasn't a laugh of joy. It was the laugh of someone who had just found the punch line to a joke I wasn't in on. Her friends were already cheering, but they weren't cheering for a union. They were cheering for the content.
Face. He's so serious.
One of her friends shouted while zooming in with a camera. The silence that followed was deafening to me, but the crowd was roaring. I looked at Lena. She didn't reach for my hand,
He just stood there.
smiling at her phone screen, waiting for the perfect angle. Nate, get up, she whispered, her voice sharp as glass. You're making this so awkward. I stood up slowly, the ring still in my hand, felt a coldness wash over me that I hadn't felt in my entire life. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was the sudden violent clarity of knowing I was nothing more than an accessory in her life. I looked at the crowd,
Phew.
then at the camera lenses pointed at my face. I didn't yell. I didn't cause a scene. I simply closed the ring box, placed it on the table, and walked over to the manager who was standing by the entrance.
Fuse bait.
I had anticipated that she might not want the commitment, but I hadn't anticipated the cruelty. What she didn't know was that I had installed a small, professional-grade 360-degree camera hidden in the floral centerpiece of our table,
Fuse.
intended to capture the perfect proposal video for our future memories. Instead, it captured everything. It captured her whispering to Maya about how cringe I was,
Fame. It captured her.
mocking my outfit before I even knelt down. It captured the exact moment her brand became more important than the man standing in front of her. I didn't upload the video to expose her, not directly.
Phew.
I simply sent the raw, unedited file to the PR firm she was dying to work for, along with a note. I thought you should see the character of your rising star. Then, I posted the video on a local community page with the caption,
Fun times.
the most honest moment of a relationship is the one you didn't plan for. The internet is a cruel judge. They didn't just see a failed proposal, they saw a woman who lacked basic human empathy. Her followers,
Fashion.
the ones she obsessed over, turned on her within 48 hours. The contents circle abandoned her when her engagement rates plummeted. She lost her job, her brand, and her reputation. In a better place now.
Can you love someone?
You shouldn't have to monitor their honesty or keep a log of their lies. I didn't need the ring, and I certainly didn't need the marriage. Justice isn't always a courtroom. Sometimes,
Just the truth finally coming to light?
unedited and unfiltered. I don't look back anymore. I'm finally the calm, steady man I was always meant to be, and this time,
Thing.
building a life for someone who actually wants to be in it with me. She wanted to be a star, but she forgot that stars burn out the fastest when they have no substance to hold them up. Done with the performance. The stage is empty, and for the first time in years, the house is quiet. And that feels like the greatest success of all. Hey Reddit, I need to get this off my chest because I honestly don't know how to process what happened.
Big.
I spent months planning the perfect night to ask Lena to marry me. I hired an acoustic guitarist, worked with the hotel to string up warm fairy lights, and curated gold table decor that fit her exact aesthetic.
You.
The hotel manager mentioned this was a prime spot for proposals, which felt like a massive green light. The ring wasn't some massive, flashy rock, but it was custom made. A delicate silver band holding a pear-shaped diamond.
Figged.
Months ago, she had casually mentioned liking stones that looked like raindrops, and I never forgot that detailed. I genuinely believed she would be touched that I remembered something so small. I confided in my best friend Kyle.
You helped me rehearse the timing.
The plan was simple. After the cake, while the vibe was calm and everyone was settled, I would stand up, say a few heartfelt words, and cue the guitarist.
For a spectacle.
I wasn't looking something sincere. What I didn't tell a soul was that I had hidden a small GoPro near one of the rooftop planters.
You.
I wasn't planning on posting the footage, I just wanted to preserve the moment for us. Maybe I was being paranoid, but had seen how people online twist personal moments for clout, and I wanted to keep this one thing pure.
Few days before the event.
I reached out to Jade, one of Lensa's quieter, more grounded friends. I just wanted to check in and make sure I wasn't missing any red flags. Jade took forever to text back, and when she did,
Fan.
her message was cryptic,
She's fine.
but just be ready for anything. That line sat in my gut like a lead weight. I almost pulled the plug that night.
Convinced myself. I was just letting pre-proposal.
Jitters get the better of me. The week leading up to her birthday, Lena was glowing, constantly on calls, obsessing over outfits, lighting angles,
Think.
and which photographer to hire. Maya, one of her friends, had a reputation for reaching out to people's exes just to collab on drama, which always felt a little too cozy for my liking. Lena would send me texts like,
Be dressed to match my theme, followed by laughing emojis.
she wasn't being cold, just intensely focused on making her birthday look perfect for social media. I told myself this was just her love language.
Before.
I didn't sleep a wink, constantly checking the ring and running the speech through my head. Kyle called me to ask if I was sure about the timing. Some people think proposing on a birthday is a bit much, he warned. I brushed him off, saying, she loves the spotlight. This is her night, and I just want to make it even better. He sighed and said, all right, man, just keep your expectations grounded. The evening of the event,
You.
I arrived early to help the staff. The weather was crisp, the city skyline was glittering, and the setup looked exactly like the Pinterest board she had shown me. The GoPro was hidden, the guitarist was ready,
Fact.
and the staff was prepared to move on my signal. When the guests arrived, the rooftop transformed. It was filled with the usual crowd, the Pierre friends who treated life like a photo shoot, her parents, my family, and Kyle.
Finally walked in.
Looking stunning in a gold dress, her heels clicking against the stone floor. Maya was glued to her side, phone already recording. Happy birthday, Queen! Someone shouted. Lena did a playful spin, looked around and said, okay, this looks absolutely insane. She played the role perfectly, hugging her parents and posing for every flash, never once letting her smile drop. I watched from the sidelines.
Feeling a weird sense of detachment. You ready?
Kyle whispered, nudging me. Yeah, I replied, just waiting for dessert. Dinner was a blur of music and chatter. Lena sat across from me, looking vibrant,
Big.
occasionally breaking away from her phone to laugh at a story her dad was telling. I remember thinking, this is it. She's finally back to herself. When the cake came out, everyone started singing.
Phone.
Phones held high to capture the moment. She blew out the candles with a theatrical laugh, and the room erupted in applause. This was the moment. The waiter brought out my dessert plate,
Fade.
and there it was, the ring hidden under a small glass dome. I stood up, smoothed my jacket, and took a breath. The guitarist shifted into a soft, slow melody, and the room began to quiet down. I looked at her.
Voice steady for the first time.
All night, I've known you for 3 years, and it's been the best kind of chaos I could have asked for. I started. You changed how I see everything, making my life louder and brighter.
I dropped to one knee.
Gasps filled the air, and I saw Maya's camera zoom in aggressively. Then, Lena laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was a loud, unfiltered, mocking sound that echoed across the rooftop.
Think.
She looked around at her friends, as if they were all in on a joke I hadn't been invited to. Oh my God, she said, still giggling. Nate, you really thought this was serious. The rooftop terrace was bathed in a golden,
Artificial glow.
but the atmosphere had turned freezing. Lena erupted into a sharp, piercing sound, a laugh that felt like glass shattering against the velvet night. She swept her gaze across the guests, looking for a conspirator,
Her expression twisted.
into something jagged. Oh my God, she choked out, her shoulders shaking with amusement. Nate, did you seriously think this was a real commitment? We were just having a bit of fun.
Elids.
The air in the room vanished. Even the guitarist, sensing the sudden shift, let his hand fall silent against the strings. I remained on one knee for a heartbeat, 2 heartbeats, feeling the heavy,
Synthetic weight of the ring box in my hand before I slowly stood.
There was no heat in my blood, no fire of rage. There was only a profound, hollow stillness. Lena kept her palm pressed to her lips, her eyes darting toward Maya,
Vexy.
who stood nearby with her smartphone elevated, a predatory smirk etching her features. I reached out, retrieved the diamond from the dome, and slid it back into my pocket with steady, robotic fingers.
You.
I locked eyes with Lena and said,
Got it. Happy birthday.
absolute silence descended, heavy enough to choke on. Lena's father shifted uncomfortably in his chair, the wood creaking like a warning sign.
Rose face.
Had drained of all color, turning into a mask of pure, unadulterated shame. Kyle made a half step forward, his jaw tight, his hands balled into fists. But he faltered, frozen by the social gravity of the moment.
Laughter died.
In her throat, replaced by a flickering uncertainty, as if the reality of the situation had finally bruised her ego. I gave a curt, polite nod to her parents, another to Kyle, and pivoted on my heel. Footsteps resonated against the marble tiles. A lonely, rhythmic sound in the vacuum of the room. I didn't break my stride. I walked toward the elevator bank, my gaze fixed on the glowing floor indicator, ignoring the wall of staring eyes. Behind me, the rooftop remained unnervingly quiet, save for the distant, muffled hum of the city traffic. When the elevator doors slid shut, sealing me in, I let out a long, ragged exhale.
Was it?
The thread had snapped. By the time the lift reached the lobby, I had sent a single cold text to Kyle. Pay the bill, I'm finished. Kyle caught up to me briefly to hand over the GoPro he'd been using,
Ishi.
then silently retreated, his reply hitting my screen a minute later. Got it. I pushed through the hotel's side exit, stepping into the cool, biting night air that felt like a baptism. The world seemed to have stopped spinning,
Leaving me in a state of suspended animation.
I didn't reach out to anyone, and I certainly didn't glance at my digital life. Back in my apartment, I placed the ring box on my desk, watched it for a long, quiet minute,
Fuck.
then tucked it away in the deepest corner of my drawer. I killed the power to my phone, laid down, and watched the shadows play on the ceiling until exhaustion finally pulled me under. The following morning,
Volted.
awake by the frantic, persistent vibration of my phone, which showed over 100 notifications. At first, I feared a family emergency, but as I started scrolling, the truth was far uglier.
Thing.
I clicked on a link sent by a Kaliga TikTok video, and the caption felt like a punch to the gut. When your situationship proposes on your birthday. It had been uploaded by Maya. I hit play.
Frames.
Started exactly at the moment I stood up, the camera shaking with the practiced awkwardness of a staged leak. You could hear the soft, cruel giggles of the crowd before Lena's voice rang out, clear and devastating. Nate.
Thought this was serious.
The screen zoomed in, capturing my face in that moment of raw, unshielded vulnerability before cutting to black. The video had already hit 2 million views.
You.
The comments were a waterfall of casual malice. Shiz brutal. He's going to regret that for the rest of his life. Total secondhand embarrassment. By noon, the internet had claimed me as its latest plaything. Memes,
Mumdep.
reaction videos, and cringe compilations were spreading like a virus, each one dissecting my humiliation for clout. Then, the A-enhanced version started to flood the feed, turning my misery into a polished, eerie piece of fiction.
Unit.
One account had scrubbed the video, smoothing our skin and lighting until I looked like a plastic mannequin, my eyes flickering with strange, non-human glitches.
Bro is literally a bot. Look at those eyes. Ancients.
The comments section screamed, completely ignoring the fact that the person in the video was a living, breathing human being.
Dot.
Another editor had slowed down the footage,
Feud.
adding haunting violin music to turn my public rejection into a cinematic tragedy. Some anonymous account even used an AI voiceover to narrate my internal thoughts, and that's the exact moment he realized she was never his.
And I watched.
Feeling a strange, detached sense of irony as the digital world argued over whether I was real or AI-generated. Dot! I saw one version explicitly tagged, AI generated for dramatic effect.
Fend.
Yet it had amassed 500,000 likes. I let out a dry, mirthless laugh, muttering to the empty room, if technology had a conscience, it would have deleted this out of sheer shame. That evening, my mother called, her voice trembling as she asked if I was okay. "I'm fine, Mom," I said, my voice steady for the first time in 24 hours. "You didn't deserve that," she whispered, and for a moment, the weight in my chest shifted.
Ejin.
I opened my laptop and began a meticulous project, archiving every single trace of the video. I downloaded the original, the AI edits, the repost, and the Threadsea built a folder labeled proof.
This wasn't an act of vengeance.
It was an act of retaining my own reality in a world determined to distort it. Around 9 p.m., a single message cut through the static on my phone. It was from Jade. I saw the video, It read,
You.
I need to tell you what really happened that night. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs, wondering if there was any version of the truth I actually wanted to hear. I typed back,
What are you talking about? 4.
not over text, she replied instantly. Can we meet tomorrow? I powered off the phone, plunging the room into darkness, and sat there listening to the city's pulse. People were still out there,
Faint.
debating my pain as if it were a movie script. And for the first time, I realized that I wasn't just going to disappear. If they wanted a story, I would eventually give them the full, unedited truth. Hey, Reddit, it's been a while.
Vict.
And honestly, I didn't think I'd ever be back here to type this out. I was sitting in that dim, quiet coffee shop downtown, the kind of place where the wooden chairs groan under the slightest weight.
Seen that.
Jade was already waiting by the window, her phone lying face down on the table like a shield. When our eyes met, she gave me that hesitant,
Thin-lipped. Smile.
the kind people wear when they're about to deliver news that will shatter your world. Thanks for coming, she whispered. I pulled out a chair and sat down, my heart beating in a dull, rhythmic thud against my ribs.
Said you had something to tell me.
I said, my voice sounding strangely hollow to my own ears. She nodded, her fingers nervously twisting the soft fabric of her sweater sleeve. Yeah,
Things.
I probably should have said something months ago, she admitted, looking down at her hands. I didn't have solid proof back then, and I was terrified of blowing everything up if I turned out to be wrong. I just sat there waiting.
Fiend.
Because I knew that whatever she was about to say wouldn't fix the damage, but it might finally put the pieces of the puzzle together. It's about Lena, she finally said, her gaze drifting toward the window, and the proposal night.
It was random.
They knew, the whole time. A cold stillness washed over me. Lena started talking to Brandon again way back in March, Jade continued, her voice gaining a bit of steel. At first,
Fusion.
she told me they were just catching up, but soon she was dropping his name into every conversation, like she was testing the waters. They were meeting up for dinner, for drinks, whatever excuse she could come up with, Jade said.
Shaking her head.
She kept claiming it was innocent. Just two old flames clearing the air, but we all knew better. Brandon was still obsessed with her, and Lena, she just loved the attention.
Felt a bitter taste.
Rising in my throat, but I didn't interrupt. But here's the part that really hurts, Jade said, her eyes watering. Maya knew the entire time. In fact, she thought it was hilarious.
Think they used to make fun of you.
When you weren't around, calling you too stable or too boring to their drama. They joke that you were probably already planning the next year's anniversary. Felt like someone had punched the air out of my lungs, but I forced myself to stay still. They really mocked me like that? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Yeah, Jade sighed. And then, a week before Lena's birthday,
Fashion.
someone in your old group chat accidentally let it slip about the ring. Lena saw the notification, but instead of telling you, she went straight to Maya. Maya thought it would be content for their social media.
Eat.
She literally said film it and make it look like one of those viral rejection clips, and Lena, she didn't stop her. She just said, whatever, hell be fine. I leaned back, feeling the hard wood of the chair dig into my spine.
For a moment, the world felt like it was spinning.
She actually said that? I asked. Those were her exact words. Jade confirmed. I didn't go to the dinner because I knew it was going to be a disaster.
After I saw the video.
I knew she never had any intention of saying yes. We sat in silence for a long time, watching the people outside walk by with their coffee cups,
Completely unaware.
that my entire life had just been dismantled. Then, Jade unlocked her phone and slid it across the table toward me. There's more, she said softly. My eyes scanned the screen.
Felt the blood drain from my face.
It wasn't just Lena and Brandon. It was Brandon and Maya. There were screenshots of messages, late night photos, and a video of them at a bar, laughing and holding hands.
Faded weeks before the
Proposal. They've been sleeping together for months, Jade whispered. Lena has no idea yet, or maybe she does by now, don't really talk to her anymore. I scrolled through the messages, the casual,
cruel way they talked about me.
the the dates aligning perfectly with the times Lena claimed she was working late. The joke hadn't just aged badly, it had turned into a toxic waste dump. I handed the phone back.
See my hands feeling strangely steady.
Thanks for being honest, Jade, I said, and for the first time in weeks I meant it. You didn't deserve any of this, she told me. Standing up, she's not the person you thought she was,
Victon.
and she's not the person she tried to project to the world. She made sure I'd find out. Eventually, I replied, a dark final thought forming in my mind, just not in the way she planned.
Think.
I walked out of the cafe and stepped into the roar of the city, but the noise didn't bother me anymore. The car horns, the chatter, the frantic energy of the streets, it all felt like background static. I wasn't angry.
Thing, and I wasn't even sad anymore.
I was simply finished. When I got home, I opened my laptop and looked at the folder filled with the videos and the edited clips that had haunted me for a month. I thought about hitting delete.
Friend. But then I smiled a cold, sharp thing.
Instead, I created a new subfolder and named it Truth, tucking the screenshots from Jade inside. I grabbed my phone and started systematically deleting everything: the apps,
Vacations.
the fake connections, the digital ghosts. Everything was gone. I sat down and finished a work project that had been sitting untouched since that night on the rooftop. As I typed, I felt a weight lifting,
Beans Ed.
replaced by a strange, quiet peace. It had been a month, and the viral video was finally fading into the background of people's short attention spans. That weekend, Kyle dragged me out to a burger joint by the harbor,
Insisting that I needed real food and real air.
we were sitting under the outdoor heaters, and for the first time I felt like a human being again. Suddenly, Kyle's phone buzzed,
Fast.
and he looked at the screen with a face full of shock. Dude, he said, turning the phone toward me. You need to see this right now. It was a link to a new TikTok, and as I clicked it,
Fugue.
I realized the final act was just beginning. Everything felt normal, just a quiet Friday evening until Kyle's phone buzzed on the table. He stared at the screen, his expression hardening into a frown.
Before sliding the phone toward me.
Dude, you really need to cease, he muttered, his voice tense. It was a TikTok link, coming from an account I didn't recognize. The caption was bold and unsettling. Full video, no cuts.
Make your own judgment.
I hesitated, my pulse quickening, before finally pressing play. About a week earlier, I had sent the raw file to the hotel manager just to confirm the timeline for our final bill. After that moment, the original footage wasn't just on my drive anymore. The video started from that exact rooftop angle, the one captured by my GoPro. Someone had leaked the unedited, raw footage. There were no filters,
Smoothing.
and absolutely no voiceovers to hide the truth. It was just the raw sound of the wind and the light of the city. The moment played out exactly how it was etched in my memory. I stood there, speaking clearly.
While the crowd fell into a hushed silence.
Then, Lena smiled for a fraction of a second, before letting out a laugh loud enough to echo off the walls. Then came the line that ruined everything. Oh my God, Nate.
Thought this was serious? We were just having fun.
This time, you could clearly see Maya's camera aimed directly at her, and the smug smirk she wore as she kept recording. Footage didn't stop there, it captured the heavy, suffocating silence that followed. Lena's parents looked absolutely stunned, and my own mother had her hand covering her mouth in shock.
Feeds.
Kyle was caught on camera, standing halfway up, looking like he was ready to intervene before common sense stopped him. Finally, it showed me picking up the ring with a steady hand, pocketing it, saying, "Got it, happy birthday."
Then, walking away.
The clip cut to black right there. Within an hour, that video was everywhere. It didn't matter that it wasn't posted by me or Kyle. Once it hit Reddit and TikTok, it spread like wildfire.
Beach.
People started noticing the glaring differences between this and the original viral version. Wait, this isn't how the first video looked. People began commenting. He handled that with way more grace than most people would have.
Beef.
The comments flipped completely overnight. She is straight up cruel. One user wrote, "Now that I've seen the full video, I feel sick for him." Another added.
Fiancée.
Creators who had made those mocking edits started deleting their posts in shame. Some even left comments saying, "Didn't realize it was manipulated, my bad." For a long time, I just sat there with Kyle,
Fiancée.
watching the massive wave of reactions roll in. The video had already hit 2 million views again, but this time, the tone was entirely different. "You should post something," Kyle suggested, watching me closely.
People would finally see your side of the story.
I just shook my head. "No point," I told him. "The truth is already out and it speaks for itself. We didn't post anything because we didn't need to.
Second, you try to defend yourself online.
You look guilty even when you aren't." Silence often does the job much better. That night, Lena's name started trending, but for all the wrong reasons. Her old clips resurfaced, and the comments under her posts turned truly brutal. Some called her manipulative, while others started tagging her brand sponsors. Maya's accounts went private within a few hours, desperate to hide from the backlash.
Feud.
By the next morning, half the brands Lena worked with had quietly unfollowed her. A few even issued vague PR statements about respect and empathy in content creation. Everyone knew exactly who they were talking about.
Stayed off my phone for most of the day, though Kyle kept sending me screenshots.
He was enjoying the chaos way more than I was. "Dude, this is justice," he insisted. "Maybe," I replied, "but it still feels ugly." That week,
To my normal schedule.
burying myself in work, the gym, and daily errands. It felt strange how quickly life resets once you stop feeding the chaos. I started cooking again. I finally fixed that leaky kitchen tap.
Thinked, and I even visited my parents for dinner.
My mom hugged me a little longer than usual and whispered, "You handled everything with class." I didn't have an answer for that. Jade texted me a few times.
Checking in to make sure I was holding up.
Okay. We started meeting for coffee once a week, just for easy, light conversation. She didn't bring up Lena much, but I could tell she still felt guilty for not warning me sooner.
Fiancée.
I told her to let it go. It wasn't her burden to carry. A couple of months passed quietly in the background. The storm online had completely turned against Lena and Maya. Their content stopped getting likes.
People began calling them out
On every single new post. Then, one night, Jade sent me a message that made me freeze. "You might want to see this," she wrote. It was a screenshot of another viral post. But this time,
about me.
Lena's ex, Brandon, had been exposed for cheating on her again. This time, with Maya. Someone had caught them together at a hotel event, and the photos were undeniable. The comment sections were ruthless.
That's showing no mercy.
Even people who had once defended Lena were saying things like, "Karma is real," and "I guess she knows how it feels now." I didn't say anything to Jade, just replied with a short figures.
Few days.
That Linus accounts went private, and Maya's disappeared entirely. It didn't make me feel happy. Just done, it felt like the world had finally closed the chapter for me. That weekend, reopened Instagram briefly just to check in. My account was still there, exactly as I had left it since I deleted the app. I uploaded one simple picture, a closed ring box on my windowsill.
City lights.
Blurred in the background, the caption read, "Peace is greater than drama." I turned off comments, logged out, and deleted the app again. For once, it actually felt quiet, not empty, just calm.
2 years had passed before I heard from Lena again.
Her name popped up one morning in my inbox, an email titled, "Closure." I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. It was a long message, few with paragraphs stacked like she was trying to empty her entire soul into the screen. She said she had been in therapy for months. She said she had finally learned the meaning of accountability.
He admitted.
She had lost everything, the followers, the brand deals, and even her closest friends. Maya had blocked her, and Brandon was long gone.
Repost.
She made still got comments like "rooftop girl" or "we were just having fun." At the end of the email, she wrote, "I know you don't owe me anything. I just want to apologize face to face," she begged.
I need to say it out loud.
I took a deep breath and typed a short reply. "Rooftop cafe across town, Friday, noon." It felt like a fitting place for closure. Friday arrived, clear and warm.
It was the same kind of sky.
We had stood under the night. She laughed in front of everyone. I got there early and took a seat with a perfect view of the skylines. Same city, same view, but an entirely different feeling.
He arrived a few minutes late.
I recognized her before she even spotted me. She had the same posture, but a completely different energy. There was no phone in her hand, no dramatic entrance,
Thanked.
and no crowd of admirers orbiting her. She looked tired, stripped of the persona she had spent years building. She sat down, her hands shaking slightly as she looked across the table. Nate, she started.
Her voice barely a whisper.
I just listened, letting the silence hang between us, waiting to see if she was finally telling the truth. The wind blew softly, and for the first time in 2 years,
Fight.
finally started to lift. I realized then that her apology didn't matter as much as the fact that I was no longer defined by her cruelty. I finally felt free.
View. The view from this cafe is the same as it was back then.
But the feeling, the atmospheres, shifted into something heavy and unrecognizable. I arrived early, watching from the corner of my eye as she walked in. She was late.
View Chet.
I spotted her long before she caught sight of me. She carried the same posture, yet the energy surrounding her was completely different. There was no phone held up like a shield, no grand entrance designed for an audience,
Fiction.
and certainly no entourage trailing in her wake. It was just Lena, stripped down to someone quiet and plain. Nate, she murmured, her voice soft and hesitant.
She weren't entirely sure.
She had the right to speak my name anymore. Hey, I replied, my voice steady. She pulled out the chair across from me and sat down. There was no trace of makeup today.
Yoon.
Her hair pulled back into a messy low bun, and her eyes looked exhausted, drained by something I couldn't quite name. When the server approached, she barely lifted her gaze to order a simple coffee.
We sat in silence for a long time.
She kept tracing the jagged edge of her napkin with a trembling finger, over and over again. Eventually, she looked up and whispered, "You look good." "Thanks." I kept it short. She nodded,
Views.
her eyes darting nervously between her cup and my face. "I honestly don't know where to begin," she confessed. "I suppose I deserve every bit of it, don't I? The hate, the endless threads of comments, the mockery.
Never seems to stop, you know.
Every few months, the video goes viral again, and people just refuse to let it die." I didn't offer her any comfort. "I lost everything," she continued, her voice growing thin.
See the people who used to crawl over each other to collaborate with me?
"Why?" "They're gone. The brands that once threw money at me, they dropped me without a single word. What?"
Friends I thought I had, they don't invite me anywhere anymore. Terrified of the bad press.
She let out a short, hollow laugh. That didn't reach her eyes, it's empty. "Nate, I can't even go on a simple date anymore. Everyone already knows who I am before I even sit down at the table. I've become the punchline to a joke that never ends." The silence returned, pressing against us like a physical weight. Then she spoke again.
Barely audible.
"I think about that night constantly. How I looked at you, the things I said, the sound of my own voicey. Don't even recognize the person in that video. I kept my tone perfectly, even matching her pace.
Version of you still exists, Lena.
Millions of people have seen it, and it isn't going anywhere." Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back with a fierce, desperate intensity. "I know," she said.
Exactly why I needed to see you.
"I just needed you to hear me say 'em. Sorry, Nate. I was cruel. I don't expect you to forgive. I don't deserve it. But I had to get those words out." She wiped at her cheeks,
Fate.
trying to hide her face. But the cracks were showing. "I miss what we had," she whispered. "I miss the person I was when I was with you. You made me feel grounded, real. I didn't realize any of that until the fame,
Teasing.
the lights, and the people all disappeared. I don't know if it's too late, but I would do anything to start over, to have just one more chance to make things right." Her voice cracked on that word chance. She leaned across the table, her eyes searching mine with a terrifying desperation, looking for a shred of the man she used to manipulate. I remained still, unmoved. "You had that chance," I told her.
In its face.
She looked down at the table, her hands shaking so hard. The coffee cup rattled against the saucer. "I know," she sobbed, "but I've changed." I swear I have. I'm not that person anymore. Please?
You Nate, just let me show you.
Her words hung in the air, pathetic and cold. She was trembling, on the verge of a total breakdown. A part of me felt a flicker of pity. But then, the memory of the rooftop hit, Meath's sound of her mocking laughter, and the months of cold, calculated silence that followed. Before I could deliver my response, a shadow fell over our table.
Sorry, I'm late.
A voice said from behind me. Jade walked up to our table. Lena froze, her entire body going rigid. She turned her head slowly, her eyes widening in horror as Jade stepped into the light.
Afternoon sun
Caught the ring on Jade's hand, small, simple, and elegant. Jade smiled at me, ignoring the tension. Traffic was an absolute nightmare. I stood up, pulled out the chair next to me, and gestured for her to sit.
You remember Jade, don't you?
Lena's mouth opened, but no sound escaped her throat. Yeah, she finally breathed. Of course I do. Jade sat beside me, her demeanor calm, polite, and completely unfazed.
Hi, Lena stared at the ring on Jade's finger as if it were a weapon. You two are.
She trailed off. I nodded, holding Jade's hand, were engaged. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then, Lena let out a shaky,
Jagged laugh. Wow, you really moved on, didn't you?
Jade's smile didn't waver. Life doesn't wait for people to catch up. Lena looked down, her hands now clenching the table edge to hide the tremors.
Feck, I can't even hate you for it.
She whispered. You were always the only one in that group who had a soul. You were the only decent one of the lot. Jade didn't say a word she didn't need to. Lena took a shaky breath.
Trying to steady herself.
I'm happy for you, she said, her voice fracturing again. I really am. I nodded once, looking her dead in the eye. I hope you mean that. She gave me a weak, ghostly smile.
See her eyes glassy and wet.
I do. I wish I had figured things out before it was too late. I stood up, placing a few bills on the table for the coffee. It already was too late, Lena. She looked up at me.
Face pale. Do you ever think about me at all?
I met her gaze without blinking. Only when someone brings up what not to tolerate. Her lip trembled, and she looked away immediately,
Staring at her phone screen.
even though it was completely black. Jade and I stood up to leave. As we walked past her, she didn't move an inch. In the reflection of the cafe window, I saw her sitting perfectly still.
Shoulders hunched. Looking smaller than I'd ever seen her.
People walked by, laughing and talking, but no one gave her a second glance. Outside, the sunlight felt warm on my skin.
Fig.
Jade reached out and laced her fingers through mine. Are you okay? She asked softly. Yeah, I said, breathing in the fresh air. Finally, I am. We stood by the railing for a moment,
Looking out over the city skyline the same view.
where years ago, my life had felt like it was falling into pieces. Behind us, inside the cafe, I heard the sharp scrape of a chair against the floor. Lena was leaving.
A few minutes later,
She walked out into the street, head bowed, desperate to be invisible. There were no cameras, no fans, no spotlight. Just her, the sound of her heels, clicking against the concrete, and the growing, heavy weight of her own silence. That night, back home, I opened the small drawer in my desk. The old ring box was still there, a relic of a life I'd left behind. I had sold the diamond months ago, but I kept the box.
inside.
Wasn't a ring anymore, but a folded scrap of paper with a note I'd written to myself during the darkest days of the fallout. Never beg to be taken seriously by someone who doesn't respect your worth. I closed the box,
You know.
tucked it away, and finally allowed myself to smile. The rooftop, the mockery, the public humiliation, it was all finally gone. And somewhere out there, in the quiet, Lena was finally learning exactly what silence felt like.
You just dropped this new hype feature.
If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way.